Good morning, everybody, or is it afternoon? Today is Saturday, November 16th, and I want to read a piece that I wrote this morning, and it comes out of the conversation that JP and I had yesterday. First of all, let me make sure that I'm running on all the channels and that everybody can hear me. Let's see. Just have to do some technical checking in. Just make sure that it's all running properly. These things take a couple of minutes after I go live. That's the way it goes. I hope everybody's doing good this morning. It's gorgeous outside. Right now, JP is outside. There we go. Sounds good. Right now, JP is outside doing some chores in the garage. And I have been thinking about some of the things that, I have witnessed. And we actually had a personal conversation with a friend last night who was talking about their regrets about some decisions they made regarding real estate and what they're experiencing. And I thought, man, this would be a really good opportunity to read the piece that I started writing last night and finished up this morning. But I want to give everybody an opportunity to come on in before I continue. I am not streaming to YouTube today. I'm only streaming to Rumble and Rockfin, and then of course our trusty Facebook page. So please share this if you feel like it. And let me see if I can go ahead and grab the link from Rockfin and share it on some of my other social media pages. And the only reason I'm not sharing it on YouTube right now is I'm concerned that something that I'm going to be playing may cause the feed to glitch. So let me grab the link and share it out. I hope everybody's doing okay today. Like I said, it's really beautiful outside, so I wouldn't be surprised if y'all are outside just enjoying the beautiful weather. At least here it is. I don't know what it's like where you live, but where we live, it's mild and lovely, and I can't wait to get out in it. So let me know if you can hear me okay. Let me go just to one more place and we'll continue. We'll move on. Great. Okay. Okay. So many people have been talking about their where they are, especially liberals, where they are right now. They're going to their safe spaces. They're going to the places where they feel the most comforted. They're really having a hard time processing the fact that Harris has conceded. And it seems like in some ways they're showing a sort of quiet resignation to the outcome of the election this year, as opposed to 8 years ago in 2016 when they were really much more vocal about it. So, and I think that this idea of quiet resignation or moving into those safer spaces where there isn't really anybody to challenge their worldview, I think that is all coming from what their work environment tells them to do. I mean, they're told to take spa days and they're told to, take mental health days, and of course they get paid for this time off. And and during this process, what I tried to do was expand on it a little bit in this piece that I wrote, where I could maybe go into areas that not too many people are really reflecting on. And this is a carryover from the conversation that JP and I had yesterday on the Friday reading, where we started talking about how things are really changing in the world. So, without further ado, let me find that piece and we'll move on into it. Ironically enough, it also was prompted by Mike Tyson, believe it or not. Not because I follow boxing and I know that he is trending for many reasons, but there was a conversation that he had with a young TikToker, which I thought was incredible. At least a portion of that conversation was sort of the wake-up call that liberals really need. And if you're just joining, this is a carryover from yesterday's very animated and electric and electrically charged broadcast that we did. It was almost 2 hours, so thank you for hanging in there with us yesterday. Where we did a Friday reading and we talked about the dangers of RFK Jr. as HHS secretary. And then we talked about the dangers of the role itself and how it really doesn't matter who's in the role. What matters is that the role has been given an enormous amount of power over the entire United States. So there are certain laws and codes that need to be reversed and uprooted in order for us to really, progress, in order for us to really get anywhere. But and we also talked about how, the wage slavery situation that we're all in right now is sort of undergoing a reset as well. And we touched on that briefly. So in this broadcast, I wanted to focus on that alone. And I also wanted to bring in the commentary from Mike Tyson, as well as address and kind of explore the possibilities that certain members of the American population might be going through something like an existential crisis. And that's probably the reason that we're seeing this Mike Tyson interaction to begin with. All right. I think we're all sort of going through an existential crisis anyway. So let's go ahead and read the piece. I forgot my water. Well, that's okay. We'll get through it. Let's see. Okay. So the existential nihilism of Mike Tyson. I'll try to make that a little bit bigger so you guys can see it on the screen. This is my Substack piece that I wrote last night and then finished it out this morning. Also known as How the Great Reset Will Leave Much Out of History Books Yet to Be Written. Over the last couple of weeks, liberals have been collapsing into ennui. One individual we are acquainted with spoke of how he broke down in a sudden torrent of despair and tears in front of strangers on a city train at the enormous complexity of the world, the burden of knowledge, and the sudden crippling discovery that he has no legacy, no future, and no reason to live. And so on cue, Mike Tyson responds. So let me pull up the Mike Tyson interaction. And I'll play it for you.
Well, in your return to the ring for this fight, you are setting a monumental opportunity for kids my age to see the legend, Mike Tyson, in the ring for the first time. So after such a successful career, what type of legacy would you like to leave behind when it's all said and done?
Well, I don't know. I don't believe in the word legacy. I just think that's another word for ego. Legacy doesn't mean nothing. That's just some word everybody grabbed onto. Someone said that word and everyone grabbed on the word, so now it's used every 5 seconds. It means absolutely nothing to me. I'm just passing through. I'm going to die, and it's going to be over. Who cares about legacy after that? What a big ego. So I'm going to die. I want people to think that I'm this, I'm great. No, we're nothing. We're just dead. We're dust. We're absolutely nothing. Our legacy is nothing.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That is something that I have not heard before, someone say that as an answer.
Can you really imagine somebody say, I want my legacy to be this way you're dead? Why do you want somebody to think?
True.
You think somebody really wants to think about you? What's the audacity? I think, I want people to think about me when I'm gone. Who the fuck cares about me when I'm gone? Well, my kids, maybe, or grandkids. Who the
True.
fuck cares?
And again, thank you so much for sharing that.
Okay, so that was the part that I thought was really interesting, especially with liberals going through this ennui, this deep despair over Harris conceding and them having to retreat into their safe spaces, and it falls exactly in line with what this liberal acquaintance of ours wrote on his social media page yesterday, which is he literally said, I have no legacy. I have no children. I have nothing to live for. Now, this is an individual that has never experienced poverty. They've never experienced any kind of job loss. They've always had, the privilege and opportunities handed to them. So this is a serious crisis that I think reflects what's happening in general in the population. So I wrote something to kind of address it. And I also wanted to show that Mike Tyson interaction with Jazzy, the little TikToker, who was really quite perky in response to Mike Tyson basically describing what we are all going through, which is that we're all kind of experiencing an existential crisis. So let's go back to the piece. Okay, so one individual we are acquainted with spoke of how he broke down in a sudden torrent of despair and tears in front of strangers on a city train at the enormous complexity of the world, the burden of knowledge, and the sudden crippling discovery that he has no legacy, no future, and no reason to live. And on cue, Mike Tyson, this clip of his, where he talks about what are we? We're just dust. Well, there's no legacy. We're nothing. We're going to die and turn into dust. That's suddenly been trending all over social media, almost as if it's in direct response to our acquaintances, our friends, post on social media. So let's move on. So, from my perspective, as a non liberal, who never had privilege, and after carrying the heaviest chip on my shoulder for a lifetime, I laughed when I saw Mr. Tyson's response. And then I laughed even harder at young Jazzy's complex at first, but then quickly recovered, rehearsed corporate response. And I am still laughing. Liberals have been told to find their people, find their safe space, and go to the places they find comfort now that Harris has conceded and it looks like Trump will take the throne. What liberals refused to acknowledge over the years, but what capitalism has been screaming to us for decades, is that we must prepare for it to be over. After all the whinging and blubbering of the liberals comes out of an existential crisis that we saw a glimpse of in 2008, which of course they also chose to ignore because it didn't affect their privileged bottom line. They ignored a crucial message in 2008 and to this day face the crisis of it. And that crisis is their irrelevance is starting to show in public, and they don't know how to respond except to hide in their echo chambers of gilded talking points and media regurgitated sound bites. But as the demon says in this video, this isn't a projection or a prognostication or even a model. It's just accounting. Let's see if I can play it from here.
Capitalism crashed in 2008. Predatory loans wiped out 50 years of wealth gains of the middle class. If not an outright conspiracy, they simply conspired to take advantage. Now Wall Street wants to be your landlord. The housing collapse presented a rare opportunity. Global private equity firms like the Blackstone Group are devising a new rentership society. High rents and weak millennial incomes make it all but impossible to raise a down payment. The convenient claim that millennials have evolved out of home ownership has taken hold. Welcome to the Airbnb future. Feeling left out? You wasted a good crisis. 2007-2008 came and went, and for what? You squandered the perfect opportunity. Small-time property ownership is dying. Widening inequality is defining our time. Forget the Gilded Age. This is medieval. But it wasn't always like this. U.S. tax law of the 1910s and 20s was progressive, resisting the patrimonial European model. The rich paid more. We had the Great War, then the Great Depression, saved by the New Deal, followed by the Second World War and a massive boom. Top earners paid more than 90% tax. It was the golden age of American capitalism and of American homeownership for the middle class. But don't forget, the U.S. was built on violent racial capitalism. From sharecropping to redlining to the present, homeownership has been systematically denied to Black Americans. The market crash in 1973-74 brought post-war growth to a halt. The 70s, Reagan, deregulation, decline of unions, rise of globalization and new technologies. Income inequality blossomed. And maybe you assume income inequality drives wealth inequality? It doesn't. Wealth is about assets. Rich and poor households hold different assets. Poor households have little wealth, mostly in cash or bank accounts. Middle-class households have almost all of their wealth in their houses. Rich households own stocks and business equity. For 40 years, the middle class enjoyed a favorable housing market. Their wages were stagnant, but their home values rose and so did their wealth. Enter 2007. The crash was a long time coming. The middle class wasn't meant to recover. Real estate companies did, though. Number one largest owner of real estate in the world, Blackstone, uncoincidentally grew fourfold since 2007. At the root of the crisis was subprime mortgages and predatory lending. Taxpayers bailed out the banks. The banks took the money, turned around and bought the homes they foreclosed on right out from under the taxpayers. The new landlord by divine right, the billionaire, will remain safe from insurrection in their luxury survivalist condo built in a former missile silo protected by armed guard. How futile. The CEO of Blackstone, the company that bought up all those foreclosed homes, Stephen A. Schwartzman, is the first executive to pull in a $1 billion annual salary. That's taxed at rates barely more than the annual salary of the average millennial, who's making 20% less than a boomer at the same age in real dollars. We're beyond the age of debt and onto the age of full-on predation. Schwartzman wants Americans to live in serfdom. The new 2018 tax reform pushed through this year punishes people for owning homes, the one form of wealth middle-class people have. There has been a redistribution of wealth to the wealthy. Maybe you're thinking this is all just some baseless fear-mongering. This isn't a projection, prognostication, or model. This is just accounting. You wanted an economic revolution? We're in one.
Okay, so I hope you guys were able to watch that. And if you didn't, you can certainly find it on YouTube. I've embedded it in my Substack piece. So imagine hundreds of years ago, the house slaves or the house chattel were listening in on the accountants, profiteers, and insurance company representatives as they darkened smoke-filled rooms and their voices rose in heated debate in those large meeting halls to discuss the financial crisis they faced at the time. The chattel were becoming too expensive. Even the cost of the chains they were held in was rising. It was getting too expensive to house them, clothe them, feed them, control them, train them, transport them, and even enslave them. Why did we never learn what the chattel thought when rumors of an economic revolution was underway? Was it because the gregarious, bloviated talking points that had shouted over them for hundreds of years and which eventually landed in our history books drowned out their quiet concerns of what it would mean to actually be free? It was time for an economic revolution. so we entered, into an era of a new type of slavery, wage slavery. Suddenly, the slaves were paid a pittance and they could pay for their own housing and their own clothing and their own health care and their own food and their own child care. And the profiteers profited from this new scheme enormously, congratulating themselves, of course, exploiting it to extremes over the last few hundred years until it morphed into a bloated blob of grotesque greed. History books tell us that this move out of chattel slavery into wage slavery was a great revolutionary moment. Slavery was abolished. Freedom of the oppressed was a time for celebration, not contemplation. Well, the upstart that I am, I raised my hand in class and said, so are we to believe that after hundreds of years of capitalism and profiteering, that suddenly in just a few short years, the very people that profited from this aberrant scheme suddenly developed a conscience and ethics and wanted to free their only means of production? This doesn't pass the sniff test. And all that said, though, the sense of liberation must have been palpable at that time. The energy in the air must have electrified the souls. And yet, I also imagine the sense of deep despair and fear of the unknown hung in the balance of the collective subconscious. So it is now. 4 years ago, we sat on a log in front of a babbling brook in Shenley Park, Pittsburgh, PA, and talked about what this new turning point meant. Before the term the Great Reset was trending, we explained we were all experiencing a hard reset, essentially explaining that we've all been dropped. In the same way chattel slavery were dropped hundreds of years ago. We didn't have all of the answers then, and we still don't today. But if you'd like to reflect back and see what we had to say 4 years ago, perhaps you will find a pearl of enlightenment you can apply to today. And you can find Hard Reset on our page. The confusing despair some in our population are experiencing may be a form of deep sense of closure, I imagine. Much like hundreds of years ago, when it became too costly to manage the chattel, the modern profiteers of today are finding the wage slaves are too expensive as well. When humans become so easily discarded after giving their heart and soul to a life they thought was well lived, an existential crisis appears in their midst. And the modern day libertines, profiteers, and capitalists are shouting from the rooftops that their own generated heroes, like Elon Musk, has freed the user chattel from the oppression of censorship. And the louder they shout about the golden age and freedom of speech, the more I see they are acting as cover for the move out of wage slavery back into feudalism or serfdom. The liberals are sensing this on an existential level, and because they've never had to fight for anything, really, they're limping into their padded homes of comfort food and privilege. This turning point, this new revolution out of wage slavery into something feudal and anti-life was illustrated in our video essay, The New Model Communitarianism. And much like the history books refusing to acknowledge the purely economic reasons the chattel were freed, this same moment will also not be recorded. Chattel don't write history, friends. Only the wealthy and victorious write history. I'm sure the liberals are subconsciously aware of this as they face unparalleled crisis in ways they can't seem to understand, let alone articulate. For instance, a researcher we know was told through a 9-minute video conference call that his job, his work, and all that he had done for the company was eliminated. In fact, it wasn't just his job that was eliminated, but his entire department. What is a researcher? Well, in this gentleman's case, his research was based on how users, or humans, would interact or interface with certain design models. He had spent months compiling their responses and data. but he was told by 2 HR staff members who he didn't recognize that this was now irrelevant. What message does that send to you, my human friend? We are canceling each other left and right on social media. Our fingers are easily triggered to just slam down the block button, which means, for starters, if we can't interact with each other on social media, then how are we supposed to coexist in the real world? Liberals are scuttling to their safe spaces, wrapping themselves up in their despair and snapping at anything that doesn't resemble their worldview. And the pompous gloating of the winners is an ignorant display of some sort of death celebration, as the anti-life profiteers and enslavers of humans are pumping an administration full of lies and money, lies and money, lies and money. So it's no wonder Mr. Tyson took on the appearance of what can only be described as a modern-day Bukowski. There is no legacy. We are only dust, and we will die. With our ego gently held within our human state, we are going to have to transform. Chattels somehow survived and transformed hundreds of years ago, and so will we. So I want to thank you for joining this morning, joining today on this Saturday, and letting me read my latest piece. If you got something out of it, please share it. I think that if you were to go back and take a look at some of the things that we have produced over the years, that you might get a different perspective, especially if you are from the side of the political arena that maybe voted for Harris, and you're feeling that, deep sense of despair or confusion. You might understand that there's been hundreds of years of working into another reframing. Hundreds of years ago, the network of chattel slaves that built this country, we could no longer, or the profiteers and the capitalists could no longer keep those individuals, those humans that they had enslaved. They could no longer afford them. So they turned them into wage slaves. And that's the basis for, the movement. And so we're undergoing the same thing. The current profiteers, the current capitalists, they are saying that, the wage slavers, the people that earn, an income, are also too expensive now. And we need to reset. It's why so many people have died over the last 4 years. We have 500,000 deaths as a result of drug overdoses. We have people dying mysterious deaths all of a sudden over the last few years, where it can't be explained. We talked to another friend of ours on the phone for about an hour the other night, and he sounded awful. He sounded like death. And I think we both said, "Do you have a cold? What's going on?" And he said, "Oh, it's that thing that's been going around and it lasts about a month." No, I don't know what that means. I've never, ever been sick for that long. I haven't been sick in years. So, the idea that people are normalizing suffering for such a long time, and, my heart just broke for him. That's a lot of suffering. And he sounded awful. And how many thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people in this country or on this planet are thinking that it's normal to have a really bad cold or a form of pneumonia for a month? That's a large portion of your life where you can't do anything. And you're held captive to your body's own sickness, or it's responding to something, some kind of toxin or poison. So this is what's happening. This is what's going on in the world as a result of the turning away from, what that demon talked about, where, we're headed into feudalism or serfdom. And I'm not a black pillar. I don't want to be called that. I've been called that before, and I don't want to be called that. I'm not a black pillar. I'm just describing what's happening. Hi, Robert. Yeah, so you came a little bit late, but that's okay. You can rewind and go back to the beginning. JP and I have spent the last 4 or 5 years explaining that, this is the natural course, that the way capitalism would go. I mean, hundreds of years ago, capitalists and the profiteers could no longer even afford to keep the slaves in chains. It was an economic reset. So they turned chattel slavery into wage slavery. All right. So, and they profited as a result of that. Well, now they want to turn wage slavery into something else. And they want to try to profit from that as well. So it's been about 30 minutes. So I will go ahead and sign off now. I'm going to go catch some blue sky and a beautiful day. And I hope that you guys are having a good day as well. I'll go ahead and include the link right here in the chat to the piece that I just read, which is my own piece that I read, that I wrote last night, as well as, and then I finished it up this morning. So there it is, if you want to take a look at it. And then this Friday, I will be reading a piece. I'm still kind of processing what I'm reading. It's from a new author that was recommended by W.D. James, also known as the Philosopher's Holler. So he recommended it. He reposted it on his page. And so I thought, well, this looks really interesting. And it takes a totally different viewpoint of the Constitution and sort of these patriotic talking points that we've been hearing a lot of. So just be open. I'm not here to undermine anybody or make people feel bad for their choices. I'm just here to describe a situation as I see it and then synthesize what it is that I'm seeing and describing. So I appreciate your patience with me. If you're just joining, I've been on for about 30 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now, but please go back and listen to this from the beginning. All right. Have a great Saturday, and I will see you guys Friday. Bye.